The Guardians stunk it up offensively. That's all I have to say about this past series with the Yankees. Welcome to Raw Takes. Raw Takes with Andrew Hoty. If you enjoy the show, enjoy what I have to say, well, please like and subscribe. Also, check me out on social media. You could find me on X at Hoty Andrew. You could also find me on Instagram at Hoty Raw Takes for more information on me and the show as well and what I have to say, because I'm Andrew Hoty and these are my Raw Takes. All right, let's get things started. We're going to talk some baseball today. My Cleveland Guardians in particular and the New York Yankees. They played in the Bronx, a 3-game series, and my Guardians offensively really struggled. These last 2 games were honestly pathetic offensively. And I'm just going to start off the rip, especially on Tuesday's game. Kwan, Josh Naylor, Jose Ramirez. In that game on Tuesday, the 9-5 win over the New York Yankees. Those 3 players, all-star caliber players, 1 hit. 1 hit. Brian Rocchio had a home run. He had 2 major bunts that helped the game out as well. Daniel Schneemann played out of his mind. I look at Bo Naylor having a good game. David Fry with a triple. And the 3 best batters in the lineup. 1 hit. How do you expect to win a series when your 3 best batters give you 1 hit in 1 game? That was just Tuesday's game. They didn't really do anything the other 2 games either. It's been pretty ugly. And you can't bank on bottom of the order guys to cover for the top of the order guys. That tends to not be a recipe in Major League Baseball for success. And in my opinion, the Yankees are essentially a 2-man lineup. Juan Soto, Aaron Judge. Offensively, they don't really have much else. They have an okay rotation. I don't think the bullpen's very good. I think we saw them pretty flawed in extra innings on Tuesday night. Yankees aren't that special of a team. I think we are looking at the Guardians as possibly being in competition with teams like the Yankees, in competition like the Houston Astros. Minnesota, Kansas City breathing down their next 2 games now behind in the AL Central. And Baltimore, obviously, one of the top teams. I want to say Boston and Seattle are still somewhat in the mix, but we could debate that another time. But they're still relevant in the mix. Tampa Bay, you could even put in there. But when I look at the AL right now, I look at the Guardians, I look at the Astros, I look at the Yankees, the Orioles, and the Twins and Royals. Those are the 6 teams right now that would make the playoffs today. And I look at the Guardians and I see this mess unravel. And I wonder to myself, we're supposed to be talking with this team as though they can compete with them. But they're not. They don't look like they can win a playoff series right now. The Guardians, to me, I don't think would win a playoff series right now if the season ended today. I don't trust that against the New York Yankees. I don't trust that against the Kansas City Royals either, with how Bobby Witt has been hitting. I just don't. Maybe the Minnesota Twins, because we have taken the season series and have played Minnesota relatively well. But the Guardians, to me, have so many question marks offensively, all of a sudden, that weren't there in May and June. Maybe they came back down to earth. But I still believe Kwan's a great leadoff hitter. I still believe Josh Naylor and Jose Ramirez, great 2 guys right there that could run your order like a Juan Soto and Aaron Judge. 1 hit against the Yankees on Tuesday for those 3 players. 1. In a game we won, but nevertheless won. I'm not surprised by the fact the Guardians only took 1 of 3 in that series with the Yankees. And we haven't even talked about the series with the Brewers. That series was pathetic. All on the offense. I think Gavin Williams had a bad outing in the first game against the Brewers, but honestly, the offense didn't do anything. I can't blame Tanner Bybee and Ben Lively for relatively decent performances on Saturday and Sunday when the Guardians' offense didn't do squat. Not squat. I'm looking at Kwan. I'm looking at Jose Ramirez, who may be in the slump of his life right now. I've never seen him play this poorly. And Josh Naylor. These are the 3 leaders of that lineup. They need to play like it. Because what I saw in this Yankees series especially was garbage. Complete and utter garbage. And I love the Guardians. I believe they'll figure things out. They're a good organization that will piece this together. I still think there's some question marks about the rotation. Obviously, Alex Cobb going on the AL doesn't really help the situation in terms of the rotation. Tanner Bybee, though, has been giving us some good innings. Ben Lively, I still think, has got it. I don't know if I trust him in a playoff series, but I still think he's been one of our solid leading pitchers. Gavin Williams, obviously coming back from injury. He's still playing pretty well overall. I don't put this Yankees loss on him that took place earlier today. That is on the offense. I know it was a 6-0 loss, but we did nothing offensively and Gavin Williams was pulled. I can't put that on Gavin Williams. And Matthew Boyd did enough to win on Tuesday as well. Got to give Matthew Boyd credit. He has given us actually 2 pretty solid starts. So, nevertheless, this rotation's coming together. You have the best bullpen in baseball that starts off with your closer, Emmanuel Clase, and then second is Hunter Gaddis, who I think has been pitching out of his mind this year. And then Cade Smith, probably your third best bullpen guy. Nick Sandlin's kind of coming into his own. I know he gave up some runs today, but I still think Sandlin's got it. This is a bullpen that's a force to be reckoned with. It's a bullpen that should be competing with teams like the New York Yankees and the Baltimore Orioles and the Kansas City Royals. I just don't know what to make of it. I think the Guardians may be in some trouble come postseason time, especially after the series I saw against the New York Yankees. But there's good news for us Guardians fans. The Texas Rangers are coming to town this weekend, and I believe it's going to be critical to take 2 out of the 3 in that series, if not all 3 games. We tend to actually play the Texas Rangers really well, even when they won the World Series last year. So I have faith that we're going to be able to get possibly a sweep out of them, but it's got to get done. Because what happened against the New York Yankees and the Milwaukee Brewers cannot continue moving forward, especially as it comes closer to postseason time. I just look at the rest of the American League right now. I don't see us competing with the New York Yankees. I don't see us competing with the Baltimore Orioles, even though we won the season series. I don't see us competing with the Kansas City Royals. We've struggled with them in the regular season. And they're in our division. And they still have a very big possibility to overcome us and win this division. I mean, I hope I'm wrong on it, but Bobby Witt Jr. now leads the league in batting average. It was Stephen Kwan at one point. Stephen Kwan has absolutely fallen down. Bobby Witt Jr. has risen up to the occasion. This offense needs to play like it did back in May and June and April and March, and I know we had a lot of the easier opponents then. The schedule kind of does lighten up going into September. I know we have Pittsburgh next week too, and we do have a series with the Kansas City Royals coming up, so that's not necessarily easy, but it's a critical series, and this Texas Rangers series better get us ready for those big challenges we have ahead. We end the season with the Houston Astros, who tend to always play well come August and September. If I'm the Cleveland Guardians, I'm not necessarily hitting the panic button yet, but it's time to start just rallying off some wins, focusing to business, and getting that offense rolling. Because what I saw with the New York Yankees cannot continue. And even in the win, you have bottom-of-the-order guys stepping up, which is great. You love to see bottom-of-the-order guys stepping up. But when your leadoff hitters in that game, I guess I shouldn't say leadoff hitters, but your top hitters in that game are Brian Rocchio, Bo Naylor, and Daniel Schneemann. And Daniel Schneemann was great defensively in that game, by the way. But those are your 3 leading hitters against the New York Yankees in a 9-5 extra inning win. And it's not Stephen Kwan, Josh Naylor, and Jose Ramirez. In fact, those 3 make up for 1 hit. That's just not good baseball. That's a team struggling to find their identity and piece things together. And the Guardians, heck, still are. Get it, rookie manager. Get it, new era post-Tito. But they've been doing phenomenal in this era post-Tito so far. It's only been a couple months, obviously, not a full season done. But this has been a wild ride for us Guardians fans. I think us Guardians fans are really proud of that. But it can't continue. We need to see the rotation pieced together like it has. This bullpen continue to do what they're doing. They haven't really looked as gassed as I think people may think they may by the time October comes around. And as long as the rotation settles in, I think that'll be the case. And also this offense, while those other 2 things have done the job as of late, the offense needs to step it up. And that's what I want to see from the Guardians in this series against the Texas Rangers. They need to step up this offense, rattle off some wins. That way, come October, they have a pretty sizable wild card lead, too. If they do drop off, that they can find a way to win some games. But I can't promise that I can look in the Guardians and say, that's a team that could win a playoff series, let alone get to the World Series. Heck, even the ALCS. I don't think I'd even put the Guardians in the ALCS right now. For me, that might be Baltimore, the New York Yankees, and I'd even throw in the Astros as they tend to get hot towards the end of the season. I think there might be trouble brewing ahead for the Guardians. It's going to be on them to figure out how to fix it. As you look ahead to the Guardians' schedule, they actually still have 7 games they have to play against the Kansas City Royals. So a majority of the games against KC have not been played yet. That's going to be huge for the Guardians because they already have the season series with Minnesota, even though they do have to play Minnesota one more time. But nevertheless, Kansas City, I think, is the one team that is the real true threat in terms of the fact they may not win the tiebreaker. And if they don't win the tiebreaker, there's a tie at the end of the season where they both go 90-72 or 91-71 or 93-69. Kansas City will then win the division over them. So the next week where they have a 4-game series, here at home, by the way, it's going to be crucial for the Guardians to win that series, at least get 3 of the 4. Because when they went to KC, they only had 1 of 3, and it was a big struggle. And they only split the 2 games, barring the weather delay game that was also supposed to be played. They only split those games. In that first game, they shouldn't have won. Bobby Witt Jr. had a horrible error that caused the Royals to blow a 5-0 lead. So we need to see more from the Guardians against the Kansas City Royals, and that's going to be, I think, the true focus. And they also have another series with the White Sox coming up in September, who for some reason they've struggled with, but maybe Grady Sizemore being the new interim manager hurts or helps us. He hasn't been in the organization in a long time, obviously, but I'm actually kind of excited to see Grady Sizemore face his former ball club. But nevertheless, the White Sox, interestingly, have been playing well against the Yankees, the Astros, and the Guardians, who have all been division leaders at good points of this season so far. So that's another series, I guess you could say, there's a relatively concern for, but at the end of the day, it's still the Chicago White Sox, who are 31-win team as I record this. So, yeah, I think it's going to be crucial the Guardians figure things out within the division. One more series with Minnesota, too. And just start to rattle off some wins, especially against these easier opponents. We saw them do it against the Chicago Cubs. I don't think the Texas Rangers are contenders in any way, shape, or form, which is actually stunning because they're a defending World Series champion, but the Texas Rangers have not put up a single fight this year. The Guardians need to take care of business, like they did last year against the Texas Rangers, who would go on to win a World Series. And I think they can do it. We'll have to see what happens as October inches closer and closer for the Cleveland Guardians. With that being said, though, some obstacles I think there are for all teams in the American League. The Guardians are such a feisty team still at the end of the day. I think that is a tough out for any American League opponent, regardless of what happens towards the postseason. No, I would not pick the Guardians to win a playoff series today. But I think their feistiness would force a 3-game wildcard series or maybe a 5-game divisional series. I think the big obstacle when it comes to the New York Yankees is primarily the 2-man lineup they have with Aaron Judge and Juan Soto. Those guys are trouble, and they tend to hit multiple home runs for multiple stretches. I would not want to face that if I'm any team in the American League. Kansas City Royals, obviously, I'd point to Bobby Witt Jr., but their bullpen is pretty pathetic. Seth Lugo is a great starting pitcher, though, and he'll be a tough out in any playoff game. So, for me, Kansas City, I think, could be a threat to someone to upset if they don't end up winning the AL Central. And then you look at teams like Houston, who get hot at the end of the season and figure out small ways. I still think there's some flaws in that Houston Astros rotation that we saw at the beginning of the season. So I wouldn't say they'd win a World Series, but they tend to get hot at the right moment, and I would want to play the Houston Astros in the month of October. So there is some obstacles in the American League I think all teams are going to have to face. But with that being said, which one's going to be able to overcome all those obstacles will be the big question mark. And to me, the Baltimore Orioles are young, feisty, but on paper they're the best team in the American League, in my opinion. Youth and inexperience came out in that divisional series last year where they got swept. I don't think they were expecting it, and I think they are looking for some revenge, but Baltimore, to me, should be the team to come out of the American League, if I were to say so today. But you never know what happens until you get to the dance. But teams in the American League, there's definitely some obstacles there. And even then, so you look at the National League, you look at Milwaukee. Like, I was telling a buddy of mine this the other day. Milwaukee doesn't have the best lineup. They don't have the LA Dodgers lineup where Shohei Ohtani can hit a bomb at any given moment. They don't have the Philadelphia lineup where you have a guy like Ranger Suarez who could just shut you down on the hill. But what they do have is a killer bullpen like the Guardians. And that bullpen, when you face them, you want nothing to do with them because they're practically unhittable. And they showed that against the Guardians last week. So that's the reason to look out for the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League. Obviously, the Dodgers, you look at someone like Shohei Ohtani in the lineup, and that's already a given. If I were to say any league is more competitive than the others, I think the American League is definitely way more advanced in terms of the competitiveness there. Because the National League does have a lot of 500-ish teams, like the St. Louis Cardinals. Pittsburgh has good players. I mean, you look at someone like Paul Skeens, is a great ace shutdown pitcher. But what else do the Pittsburgh Pirates have that's really shocking the world? It'll be interesting to see what takes place come October. Obviously, as a Guardians fan, you'll hope to be optimistic, but I just think about how this team was constructed. And the big addition that we added in the offseason was Austin Hedges. It's already a success that we've been able to find all this year. The potential we found. We tapped into Stephen Kwan. We tapped into the left-handed pitching with David Fry being someone who could be an ace on those left-handed pitchers. We've tapped into all that. So I've found successful bits to this season. Granted, though, the Guardians do seem like they're coming back to earth a little bit. And this could be the type of 500-ish ball club we may have predicted at the beginning of the year. I still think the Guardians are going to find a way to win 90 games. And the reason is because they just had such a good beginning of the season. It would take a lot for them to just totally collapse and have a miserable September. You have to be a Chicago White Sox, lose 20 games straight in order for that to happen. I don't think the Guardians are going to be in that boat. But they're going to have to tap into that potential somewhere. Because we saw it in April, May, and June, and July at times. We did have some rough stretches throughout July and August, as we've seen. But the Guardians still have it in there. They were able to do it in April, May, and June. I think they could do it the rest of August and maybe into September. But it may just have to be in different ways. And that's going to be on Guardians rookie manager Stephen Vogt to figure out, and the Guardians clubhouse. But the other thing, too, that I think is going to be big for the Guardians is look at those trades. Lane Thomas, so far, to me, has been a disaster. And I also think the Alex Cobb situation isn't panning out yet. He had one good game for us, so I don't want to take that away of saying it's a total failure. But the injury doesn't help. So when Alex Cobb gets back, I'm hoping he plays some more shutdown baseball come October, especially come October. But we're going to need to see that before we could say that those two trades were a wild success for the Guardians in 2024. But granted, they got themselves in this position where they weren't trading away Shane Bieber like we thought at the beginning of the season. In fact, if Shane Bieber was still in the rotation, we would be clapping right now. Because imagine how good the Guardians would be if Shane Bieber was healthy. Hopefully he'll get back and be ready to go by next year if he remains with the Guardians, which I believe he will, but we'll talk about that on a different edition of Raw Takes. Well, let's move on and talk a little bit about football. The Browns and Deshaun Watson will be a huge topic for the Browns in the coming months of the organization, especially based on what took place this week. It's already been discussed how it looked like he may have felt some soreness. He will likely not be playing on Saturday against the Seattle Seahawks. And granted, that's probably the right decision to make. But I'll just say this. Hoping Deshaun gets better and has a great season will be the biggest question mark surrounding the Browns going into this season. Because I truly believe the holes are filled everywhere else. They have the running backs. They have the wide receivers. They have the offensive line overall. I know there's question marks about Jed Wills, but I don't think that's going to be too much of a problem. You look at the defense, and that's a shutdown defense ran by Jim Schwartz. You look at the secondary, it's really good. You look at the defensive tackle situation, it's looking pretty good. So I think the Browns are really just going to have to worry about that quarterback situation, if Deshaun Watson can stay on the field. With that being said, though, I don't know why I wouldn't hit the panic button if Jameis Winston ends up starting a few games for the Browns. I just think Jameis Winston has some swagger to him that could make him a really good NFL quarterback. I saw some potential when he was with the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, when he was with Tampa, you think about the 30 interception season, but still, Jameis Winston can pass the ball relatively well. And interceptions, to me, don't necessarily matter. Obviously, in the course of a game, you may think turning over the ball could cost you, but Matthew Stafford led the league in interceptions in 2021. The Rams still went on to win the Super Bowl. So if Jameis Winston becomes a turnover machine again, but he's still throwing a bunch of touchdown passes, this Browns offense could still be really, really good. And I trust that Ken Dorsey can put a good scheme with Kevin Stefanski around that to put the Browns in good position to win, regardless of who's quarterback. But obviously the Deshaun Watson situation is going to be something to watch, especially because Deshaun Watson has just been banged up the last 2 years. He's already been away from football for so long. We'll have to see what takes place with the Browns and how they figure all those things out, because I think the big thing for them this season alone is just Deshaun Watson. I think we know what the coaching staff's able to do. I think we know what this roster on paper is capable of doing. They just got to go out there and execute. The question is, will they? I think they will. But they got to execute. And that's going to start with number 4, the Browns quarterback, Deshaun Watson. The final week of the preseason's coming up. Is there anything huge I'm expecting outside of the games that are coming up on the slate? Not really. I think you may learn about certain starters, certain second-string guys, third-string guys, who is fighting for roster spots, who may go play better elsewhere, those kind of things. And that's what preseason I still think is good for. But other than that, to me, there's nothing significant about the preseason that I think is going to eventually affect the outcome of the regular season. I mean, I know a lot of fans of Denver are getting excited about Bo Nix becoming the starting quarterback based on a good preseason he's had. Dorian Thompson-Robinson had a great preseason for the Browns last year. Did you see his first start against the Ravens last year? It was not very good. So Bo Nix is going to take time to learn the NFL system. I'm glad he's had a good preseason, but it's not going to matter come regular season time. J.J. McCarthy, we won't even see him take a snap in the regular season because of what happened in the preseason. And that's probably ruined the Minnesota Vikings 2024 season, in all honesty, because they need their number 1 guy throwing passes to Justin Jefferson. And Sam Darnold's been around this league. I think he could be a solid backup QB. But when you're in a division with Detroit and Green Bay right now, I don't think Minnesota's going to be competing for the NFC North title or winning a bunch of ball games. That's a tough situation. So I don't get too excited about the preseason. I get excited about seeing some good plays made by younger players. I get excited to see the starters do some great things, like Patrick Mahomes when he had that terrific behind-the-arm throw. It was incredible, but at the same time, like, Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. We see him do incredible stuff in the regular season. It doesn't count right now. So yeah, that's just my take on the preseason as we go into the final week of it. There's just not that much to me that's really exciting or something that we're going to really learn about all 32 teams going into the regular season that may start to unfold. To me, it's just rehearsal. It's rehearsal for the young guys. Hey, if you can't play well for us, you can go play for somebody else, and here's some good film on tape to present it as your resume. But that's what it is. That's what it is. I mean, more discussions have taken place on how pointless the preseason may be. I think that may still continue, but for me, there's not much about the preseason that I think is going to shock our world this weekend about teams that we may have already not known about. What we will learn about surprising facts of each team is when we're about week 5 or week 6 of the regular season, when teams are already established, most likely as being good or bad, and where they can rank out as the regular season progresses. The other big story this week is some comments that quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, Tua Tagovailoa, made about a former head coach of the Dolphins, Brian Flores. I'll say off the record, I believe Brian Flores should not have been fired from the Miami Dolphins. I did think Mike McDaniel was a good hire when they hired him, but I don't think Brian Flores, with the winning resume he did bring to Miami, it made a lot of sense. Maybe there was some difference just in opinion with his voice in the organization compared to where other people were at. But I think Tua's comments were a bit harsh, but at the end of the day, I mean, Brian Flores also handled it really well with his response. I just think that situation already was kind of a burnt bridge for both the Dolphins and Brian Flores, and Tua Tagovailoa adding some fuel to the fire, I don't think really changes much about it. I really don't. Although I will say, the Minnesota Vikings and Miami Dolphins do not meet this year, but if they did, that would be an interesting game to watch, especially after those comments were made. I remember I was excited to watch the Broncos play the Jets last year after the comments that Sean Payton made about how disastrous the situation was in Denver. But obviously the Jets would end up winning that game, and it was kind of like a coaching revenge situation for Nathaniel Hackett. of the Jets. But, those little things kind of fuel some fire to certain games. I know when the Browns played the Panthers a few years ago and Baker Mayfield's, I don't want to say comeback game because it was down in Charlotte, but Baker Mayfield's kind of revenge-esque game against the Browns, and the Browns ended up winning on the Cade York field goal, and we're going to get to Cade York in just a second. Those kind of games are still kind of fun when there's some chirping going on between players or coaches or headlines in the media, and you see those kind of revenge-esque games. Those are always kind of fun to watch. So it kind of stinks the Vikings and the Dolphins don't meet this year. And I think both organizations are just on separate paths. Brian Flores is worrying about working up that Minnesota defense, and Tua Tagovailoa is working on ensuring that Dolphin offense is in good hands. But like I said before, I'm not really sold on to Tua's skill set. We'll have to see how Miami season plays out. But that's my thoughts on that situation. I just feel like the bridges were already burned by that point. And Tua's comments didn't really add too much fuel to the fire, maybe just in terms of their relationship. But to me, not much else of anything, because I think Brian Flores has a pretty good gig going on with Minnesota. And I think we're going to see both teams do different things anyway. The other big thing, Cade York, former Browns kicker who had a great game-winning field goal against the Carolina Panthers from 58 yards back in 2022. He's been traded to the Washington Commanders for a 7th-round pick. That's the right call because Dustin Hopkins has sealed himself as the Cleveland kicker. So I don't think having Cade York here makes any sense. I think it's good for the Commanders to get a guy who's younger, who has potential. I mean, this guy was kicking 70-yard field goals. I'm not saying that would happen during a game, but he was kicking 70-yard field goals in practice before, so I didn't want to give up on Cade York. Obviously, he had a rough preseason last year, and you had to move on. And they brought in Dustin Hopkins, and it ended up being possibly the best decision they made last season, to go 11-6. So to me, Dustin Hopkins is already well established as the kicker of this team. Cade York going to Washington is a perfect situation. It's already a young team that I'm not expecting to win a lot of games this year with a rookie head coach and a rookie quarterback. And that's just a good situation, I think, for young players and young kickers to go like a Cade York, especially because he's had so much trouble in terms of performing on the field. So that is a good trade, I think, for the Washington Commanders, and a better trade for the Browns to try to steal a late draft pick and turn him maybe into the next Brock Purdy. I'm not saying it's going to be a quarterback, but you never know. If you have a late 7th-round pick and it turns out to be a great selection, it could be a steal. So I think for both teams, it's a benefit for Washington and Cleveland. And I feel happy for Cade York that he's kind of started to piece things together a little bit in his career, and I'm rooting for him as he goes to the Commanders. That'll be it for this edition of Raw Takes. Glad to catch up on all the sports news with you. Don't forget, once again, like and subscribe if you enjoy Raw Takes, and check out the show on Instagram, Hoty Raw Takes. Check me out on X or Twitter at Hoty Andrew. And like I said before, that Facebook page is pending. So thank you for joining Raw Takes once again. We'll be back next week with more on sports, because I'm Andrew Hoty, and these are my Raw Takes.